Welcome back. There's so much I want to cover, so let's dive right in. Now, the core of what we'll cover is adding support for custom avatars. But before we get there, we of course have to add a few things. So I'm going to return to my users migration. And yes, I will ultimately want a column for the avatar, but that should be nullable. But also, while we're here, right now, the name could be anything. It could be a full name. I'd like to differentiate. So your full name is not the same as your username. So your username might be John Doe, but your full name is something like this. So I want to add support for both of those. The only thing is the username has to be unique, just like on Twitter. All right, so yes, I can run migrate fresh. I'm going to lose all my sample data, but that's fine. However, if I register a new user, notice there's no section to choose a username. Okay, let's fix that real quick, and we'll have to update the form that Laravel provides out of the box. So this uses Twitter Bootstrap. We could update this, but we're short on time, so I'm going to stick with what they currently have. So here's the name section. I will add a new one here for the username, and then I'll update all the attributes. Like so, and then just fix this error there. Okay, so now we have a section to accept a username. However, when we process it, again, this is the register controller that Laravel UI provides, but if we scroll down, we're not doing anything there. So we have to validate it, we have to create it, and then we have to update the fillable fields. Okay, username is required, and it is unique on the users table. You have to have a unique username, and I will reformat. Next, actually, one more thing. We should make sure that the username you provide is valid, right? So if you want a username like this, we're not going to allow anything like that. No spaces. So in these situations, you can stick with the alpha dash validation rule. And again, that reformats. This means you can provide letters or numbers or dashes or underscore, but no spaces or anything else like that. Okay. Next, if we scroll down, if we create the user, let's pass this in. And then last little thing here, on our username model, fillable fields, you can either turn this into an empty guarded array, which I often do, or you can add it here. These are the attributes that can be mass assigned. Okay, so now, if I scroll down real quick, here's where we generate a path to the user's profile. Notice we're still looking at the user's name. Let's change that. We're not going to use the username as the identifier. And actually, while we're here, that means in our routes file, anywhere that we use route model binding, let's update this to the username. All right, I think we're all set to go. So now let's create a brand new record for John Doe. And he has an account. And if I go to the profile, we can see his full name here, which is fine. But notice we're actually using his username in the address bar. Okay, next, before we edit the profile, notice if you create a brand new account and you don't have any friends or tweets, this doesn't look very good. So I want to fix that. Let's go back here, and it's really easy. We'll start by visiting the timeline, and notice this assumes we have tweets. But what if we don't? Let's do for else. If we have tweets, show them, but if we don't, or on the condition that this collection is empty, let's just say, set some padding, and we'll say no tweets yet. But we can add our first tweet. Okay, next, let's go to the friends list, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So if we don't have any friends, then we'll say no friends yet. All right, much better. So I can now edit the user's profile right here. Profile/edit, we're going to have a form, and think about it, we're going to update the user. So let's submit a patch request to that user's endpoint. Okay, and I have some snippets here to make this really easy. So a user has a name, and real quick, very simple. We have a label for, and then we have our attribute here. It is required, and then, of course, we have a validation check. Okay, let's do another one. What about the user's username? All right. They can update their email address. And the only thing I'm going to change here is set a type of email so we get some browser validation. And then what about their password? Password. And then you have to confirm your password. So it's really important we follow this naming convention. If we tell Laravel that this password attribute should be confirmed, then it's going to look for a similar attribute named password_confirmation. So that's why I'm naming it that. Okay. And we'll add the avatar in just a second, but first let's submit. Come back, refresh, and there we go. Looking good. But I do want it to default to the current details for the user. So if I scroll back up, we could say the current value for this input is the user's name. This one would be the user's username. Next, we have the user's email. What else? Password, of course, you would always leave blank. So we now get this. Now, password, you can either update your account without requiring a password, or you always must include it. It just depends on what you're building. If you're always going to require it, make sure you add the required attribute. Okay, so now you can't submit this form unless you fill out all of those inputs. Okay, but if we did and we submit it, it's going to fail, right? Because we haven't added the endpoint. So we'll do that now. And let's grab some of this. So if you submit a patch request to this endpoint, we will hit Profiles Controller and an action called Update. Now, if I run it again, it'll let me know, well, I don't see that update action. All right, let's do that now. I'll copy this. And if I am updating the resource, we should start by validating. So let's do this super quick. We need to validate the username, the name itself, the email, the password, and then the avatar shortly. So the username is going to be string, required, a maximum of 255 characters, and then it should be unique. So I can say rule unique on the user's table. However, if we kept it like this alone, it would always fail validation. So let's say you sign up with a username of John Doe, and then you update your profile, and you don't change the username. Well, it's going to check and see, well, you provided a username of John Doe, but I already see one in the database. Even though it's yours, it doesn't know that. So we need to say, well, you can ignore the current user. And I'll reformat. Okay, next. The name is also a required string with a maximum of 255 characters. Actually, right here as well, we'll do the alpha dash. All right, next, the email address is a string. It's required, and it should be of type email. Finally, the password is required, but it doesn't have to be. We're just doing it in this case. You have to provide a minimum of 8 characters in this case and a maximum of 255, and it should be confirmed. So this again is where it's going to now look for an attribute called password_confirmation, and it will ensure that those two match. So the only remaining thing here I see is the email. So we ensured that the username is unique other than the current user. The email address, the same thing. That too should be unique. And if you don't provide the attribute to check against, it will always assume the current one. So this is what you get. All right, so let's assume, and by the way, if you don't like all this validation, you can throw that into a form request class and then type it up here. Anyways, assuming everything passes, we're going to update the user with the given attributes, and then finally return a redirect back to the user path. All right, let's give it a shot. Let's change it to Frank Doe. And there we go. We've updated his account. But it looks like the username, it looks like we forgot to update that. So let's do that in the process. And there we go. Now we've updated his information. All right, things are looking good, but now let's finish the avatar support. So we'll come back to profiles/edit. And let's say after the user's username, we're going to add another one for their avatar. Now, the only thing is, if I give it a refresh, the avatar should be a file upload, right? So let's set it to a type of file. And then, of course, whenever your form accepts file uploads, you need to set this as usual. Okay, so now You'll see on my desktop, I've set up some demo avatars. So we could select one here. And here's how this is going to work. You'll be happy to hear it's really easy. So before I submit this form, what we're going to do is right up here, die and dump the avatar field. Okay, so notice we get an uploaded file instance. Laravel automatically reps this for you, and it gives you lots of helpers. Specifically, these store methods, store and store as, you'll reach for a lot. Store the uploaded file on the disk. All right, let's give that a shot. So right down here, well, a couple things first. The avatar right now is going to be required, but I wouldn't recommend that because that would mean every time you update your profile, you have to re-upload the avatar, and you don't want to do that. I'll show you how to fix that in a moment, but it should be a type of file. Okay, so now I can say request avatar, and we're going to call that store method and provide a directory where it's stored. In this case, all avatars go here. So after you run this, it's going to save the image and return a path to where the image was stored. And that is what we will actually save to the database table. Not the image itself, but a path to where the image is located. So I'm going to update that key and then update the user. All right, let's give it one more shot. And there we go. So we're not yet showing the image. However, I think it did work. If I open the sidebar, look for a storage directory, and sure enough, you can see this avatars folder. And there it is. We have a unique name. But notice in our case, we actually want it in this public folder. It's a publicly accessible image in this case. So we're going to change this up. Now let me point your attention to the config file systems directory. So like many of the components in Laravel, when it comes to your file system disks, maybe it's your local disk, maybe it's something remote, maybe it's Dropbox, maybe it's Amazon S3. So Laravel offers driver support to pick which one you want. Notice in this case, it's defaulting to the local driver, but there's all these other disks you could choose from: local, public, S3, or you could even create your own. Now I want public in this case, so I'm going to set the driver to public. All right, so now if we run it again, you'll see that we're actually saving the image to that public directory. So let's come back up, storage, public, avatars. This is what we want. All right, so now it's in the storage directory, but we actually want to symlink it to the public directory. Next, though, we do want to create a symlink so I can access this from my main public directory. And luckily, Laravel makes this easy. There's a storage link command you can run, and there you go. Now we've symlinked it to a public storage directory. And you'll find that if we scroll up, right there. Okay, so now the only remaining step is to link to the avatar. If I go to Table Plus and give it a refresh, notice at the moment, we forgot this. So we uploaded the avatar, but because we didn't set that as a fillable field, Laravel ignored it. So again, this is why I often prefer just to be smart about how I assign my attributes rather than always forgetting to come back here. So you could do this, or again, if you trust yourself, you could just do this. Okay, so now let's do it one more time together. And if I come back to Table Plus and refresh, now we do have a path to where that avatar was stored, which means we can now display it here on the profiles page. It's coming right here. Yeah, so at the moment, it's calling this attribute avatar. And you'll remember we set that as a custom accessor that defers to that Pravatar API. I no longer need that though. Let's instead change it to the path to the asset. So let's accept that. All right, so have a look. We come back to Firefox, I give it a refresh, and now we have our avatar. And real quick, if you're not familiar with that asset helper function, it just creates a full URL to the asset in your application. And what's nice is this will now be reflected everywhere. So let's now update, and I'll use an actual one of me. And there we go. So let's finish up by allowing you to see your avatar on the edit page. And this will be a little clunky, but we'll do it super quick. So let's find the avatar, and let's see, maybe I'm going to wrap this whole thing within a div. And then actually this should go there too. But below it, we could have an image, again, to the user's avatar. Finally, let's set a width of 40 pixels. All right, so if I come back, now I can see my current avatar. However, if we scroll up, I can set a display of flex. But it's being stretched in this case. Yeah, that's true. So what I should do instead, let the label be on top, and then I'll flex this instead. Yeah, let's do this. So the label will be at the top, and then we'll have a flex section where the image and the input are stored, and then below all of that is the arrow. Yeah, this is better. Come back, refresh, and now we see it on the far right. And you know what? That's fine for our needs. You can play with that and make it a little more pretty if you like. But very good. We got quite a bit of work done in this episode. Thanks for coming along. In the next episode, we'll take some final steps and we'll then wrap up the project.